We're going to start right at the surface and the notebook interface and things that have changed. And this is possibly for those who are interested in dark modes. This is perhaps the most obviously profound change, is that we now have a full support for dark mode. So I can switch between light themes and dark themes. And while on the surface, that's simply changing backgrounds to black and fonts to white, actually to do this correctly, there's every toolbar and dialogue and interface needs considering. The graphics styling, some of these things we've been doing for a couple of versions in preparation have to be considered. The color schemes have been updated a little bit in some of the plots again, just to make sure that they work well in both. And little details like if I'm wanting to prepare things to support both, what do I want to happen to things like the color of a graphic? And I'm illustrating here 3 different choices that I am in control of as a user. I can maintain the color, and the colors have been chosen to try and be good in light and dark. We can do an automatic color conversion to try and guess what a sensible dark mode version of that color would be. Or I can take complete control and say, in light, I want it to be orange, and in dark, I want it to be blue, as I've done with this one. It'll support your operating system choice. It can be done at a single notebook level or as an override and set mathematically in contrast to your operating system. So all of those details are taken care of. For a lot of people, this is just an aesthetic choice it's argued that dark modes are easier on the eye when you're working for long periods of time. It also has the effect that if you have modern OLED laptops, it actually has a significant effect on power usage as well, to not have to light up your screen if you're working for a long time on battery. So now, completely the opposite end of the spectrum on notebooks, we've been working systematically now for quite a few years of trying to make sure that the notebook is as bound into the Wolfram language as possible, so that it can leverage the fact that we're designing both the notebook environment and the language. And there's an awful lot of ease of use features now that are kind of built in, the kinds of things you see in IDEs coming to the notebook. One small one, but I elevate it here because I particularly love it, is that you're very often in a situation where you're typing something, oh, I forgot to put some brackets around it. How many mouse clicks and keyboard strokes is to put the brackets around that? Well, now you can select content, and I can immediately just type the parentheses, and the open and close is wrapped non-destructively around the current selection. And that goes for all the different bracket types. I could put brackets around that. I can put quotes around that. And it does the before and after without me having to click to the beginning, typing a character, click to the end, hope to balance it correctly, and type the close. Small feature, but it gets you doing what you're doing faster and with fewer errors, and adds to a whole catalog of such features now in notebooks. The next is really on the input-output side, but I think it's kind of interesting to look at as a kind of notebook interaction, is Markdown support. So now when we, if you select content and do the copy as within Notebook, you'll see that there's this new option, Markdown. Markdown is this sort of standard text-based representation. So if I put that into a text cell, there is the Markdown version of that cell that has various renderers in different IDs to try and look similar, but is in a very simplified human editable text format. And we've tried to work across the notebooks as a whole. So if you limit yourself to fairly basic notebooks, then at a whole notebook level, I can do save as on this, choose Markdown off the list, make a Markdown version of that notebook. Let's close this thing and reopen the Markdown. So if I find let's see, all file types or Markdown files, there's the file I just created, and I've round tripped between Markdown on disk back to notebook. So we've got sort of two-way compatibility between individual bits of content and notebooks in Markdown. And since Markdown is a pretty popular format, and it handles very nicely in things like Git for diffing, that's a potentially useful feature for a lot of people. There is a new feature in Presenter Notebooks. So Presenter Notebooks are actually what I'm using here to do the main presentation, sort of PowerPoint style, one slide at a time. And if I create a new one here, I can show you a new feature there, Presenter Notebook. We've always had the problem of when you're editing, you have various slides that can mark up where one slide begins and another ends. So I can have a notebook with lots of slides in it and some content, and there's my slide. But how tall is the slide? Well, it doesn't really matter with text. It'll auto scale if I'm presenting on a screen that's long and thin or short and fat. But with graphics, they have an aspect ratio. So now we have a new capability here where there's the button here that allows me to insert a wrapper for images and graphics. So this is both photos and sort of 2 and 3D graphics. And I can decide the behavior as I go through different screen sizes and screen aspect ratios. I can have it always fit on screen, as wide or as tall as possible to fit, or I can have it full width and it can potentially go off screen vertically. And I can set it to only cover, say, 50% of the vertical height or 50% of the vertical width. So now, even when I've got tall, thin graphics on a very wide screen or vice versa, you can guarantee not to get the graphic clipped halfway through in the present when you jump into presentation mode, and still make maximum use of the screen. So we've all been there. It looks beautiful on your home screen. You go to the lecture theatre, you plug in, and the monitor's on a completely different aspect ratio, and things aren't quite right. That now hopefully is a solved problem.